Welcome to Barrio Voices, where we highlight the voices of our barrios, familias, and communities. This is Velas, and I hope you're having a good one. Sit back and enjoy la plática. Órale. Now, welcome back to another great episode of Barrio Voices. I hope that you all are having a wonderful day as always. And today's episode, we're going to be talking to Reyna. She's going to be talking about her own experience becoming an ED, an executive director within the nonprofit world. As you all know, being Latina, any kind of job is the workforce, right, is always an obstacle, right? But also in the nonprofit world, there's a lot more politics to be involved, you know what I mean? So I want y'all to, tune in and get to hear her experience when it comes down to the politics of being Latina within the nonprofit world, right, and becoming the executive director and doing even more things, right? She's really an outstanding individual, representing on her own pueblito in Oregon, so showing love to everybody out there up north. And besides that, I'm gonna have DJ Velas hit the rola, Órale.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Reyna Lopez. Use she, her, they pronouns. I am the executive director of PCUN, Oregon's Farm Worker Union. And yeah, I mean, I'm a Latina, Mexicana. My family is from Mexico. My dad's from Zamora, Michoacan. Mom's from Hermosillo, Sonora. And, I have a story like everybody, like a lot of Mexicanas and Chicanos do here in the United States. My family came here to do work in the fields. Started in Santa Ana, where I was born, actually, even though, I left really early on, and I'm an Oregon girl now. So, and grew up in Salem, and really just kind of saw a lot of injustice growing up. And I actually grew up on a street where everybody that lived on the street was related to me, which actually was really fun. So it wasn't all bad. But I think that the things that I even realized as a very young child was like, wow, things are really different for me and my family than my, little friends at school that were white. And I think that really stuck with me for a very long time. From a very young age, I was very justice driven, and even as a little kid, organizing all my cousins to do all kinds of things. And, back then it was tag and stuff, but now it's movement building and organizing around things that are important to me and to my community.
When you say organizing your little cousins, what do you mean by that? Give me a little picture.
Just lining everybody up. We're all right, guys, what do you want to do? Are we going to play tag, or are we going to do hide and seek? Let's take a vote.
Yeah, dang, already being democratic.
Democracy is important.
That's right. There you go. That's tight. I like that. I think it's cool to see that, since a young age, you're taking on the leadership role. I think it's really key to our us wanting to make a change. You're seeing that needs a order in our the communities. There's a lot of mayhem, a lot of injustice that we see that we need to straighten out. And often, like we said prior to this recording, is that sometimes we gotta create the change ourselves, And I think it's really outstanding how, like yourself, you went from organizing your little cousins to taking on leadership roles within activism places, right? And now, as a ED for PCUN, what's the experience like? How has that journey been in terms of for one, having to move up to Portland, and also being a mujer Latina, a person of color, what are all those roles and all those identities that you carry, right? Go to build that experience that you had within that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's all gone. It's happened really quickly. I mean, I'm not that old, right? I'm a pretty young person in my role, and also I think that it shows that there's been a gap in leadership of people that look like us in these spaces. But I've been in this role now for about 2.5 years, and I'll be transparent about my age. I'm 33 years old, and I think that let's see, 2.5 years ago, no, now 3 years ago, how it happened was I got coffee with one of my dear friends and colleagues, Jaime Arredondo, who's the executive director of the Capaces Leadership Institute, which is a sister organization of PCUN's. And he was like, hey, so we're making a lot of changes at PCUN. Ramon Ramirez, who's my predecessor and just kind of a legend and icon in farm worker organizing here in Oregon. Everybody knows Ramon. So it was time for him to retire, and he was telling me about it, and I was like, great, yeah, tell me more. And he's like, well, I want to know if you want to come run PCUN. And I was just like, wait, what? Run PCUN? Really? And he's just like, yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot to the elders, to the community, and people really, they respect you and they want you to come here, and it's time to come home, is what he said. And I felt that so hard because I was working in some really mainstream organizations around that time. And frankly, I was exhausted. I was in these spaces where I felt like I got recruited to be on these, like in these director positions, not executive director positions, but on executive teams. And a lot of the time, it kind of felt like people wanted me there because I had this very like natural leadership talent, came with this like very scrappy, organizing lens, like with this Latino community backing, and they wanted that in their organization. But unfortunately, like it really meant that white folks want you to save their organizations, and you don't get treated with the respect that you deserve when you speak up about the internal white supremacy structures in those organizations. And I was freaking tired, honestly. I was burnt out. But because I was working in these different campaigns, before that, I was at this organization, Family Forward Oregon. That was wonderful. It's a women-led organization, but it was mostly led by white women, and was working to lay the foundation down for this campaign called Paid Family Medical Leave. And then before that, I was the interim director at the Fair Shot Coalition, which it was the first time they had a woman of color lead the coalition. And then before that, I had spent 2 years at this organization called Our Oregon, which is kind of like a machine politics, like known for being like just really, really like hardcore about ballot measure campaigns. And those were kind of the places where I was really just kind of like, wow, really questioning a lot of my decision to go into organizing. But before that, I had been at Causa, Oregon's immigrant rights organization, for about 4 years as the civic engagement director. And that is how I got in touch with PCUN and the sister organizations. And for me, going there was a full circle, like home. It was coming home because for many years before that, I just was always in these spaces where I stuck out like a sore thumb. First being a first generation college student, I went to a private university in Salem called Willamette University that was like, you could count the people of color on your hands. Lots of rich, very wealthy kids. I was not at all, that. I grew up in Northeast Salem where everyone's Latino or Black or Vietnamese or immigrant. And that was just really different part of Salem that I had never seen. But while I was at Willamette, that was when I made the decision to become a politics major, because I had taken this class that was all about labor organizing, and I fell in love with the labor movement. Something about it, I just felt so connected to it. And that year, I also started my first political job as an intern for a senator. And that was back in 2007, my first gig in politics, only little Latina on that side of the building. And that was also the year that they took away las licencias in Oregon. And so that May Day, I remember there was more people than I had ever seen in my life there. And I was just like, I remember just looking out the window of the senator's office, and I was like, what am I doing in here? I should be out there organizing people. And pretty much right after that, after I was done with that internship, I graduated and I did an organizing fellowship for an organization called the Bus Project at the time that was all about youth organizing and doing work around candidates that supported the progressive vision we had for democracy. And that was how I got in touch with Causa, and just being like, I remember seeing you at May Day. I want to come work for you. And pretty much right after that, they offered me a job. And I did a lot there. I like to say I got a lot of my scars there, but really with the position at Causa, that led me to be on the political action board of PCUN. And even throughout my time, even though I was away, I still had a finger on it. But when I finally got to PCUN, the thing that I really had to do in my leadership was I had to really look inside myself to really own where I came from in ways that I had never done before. And that was like when I really started asking more questions around the story that my dad would tell me about how we came to Salem, which was, well, un día tu tío Rey nos dijo, like, there's jobs in Salem. So we went up there and we became pineros. And PCUN is the union of Pineros y Campesinos Unidos del Noroeste. And I was like, Dad, so were you a member of PCUN? And he's like, yeah, yo fui del PCUN is the way that they say it. And so I went and looked up his record recently, and there it was. And I was just like, wow, PCUN is like, this is in my blood,
So all those connections, it's crazy. And I think it's really fascinating too, like how like you want to now find your place, right? Or like find a place where you could call home, or like see yourself within the organization. And I could imagine like, or más bien like, what kept you encouraged? Because I know like going in the beginning of your journey, right? When you're going to like interning, right? Or, going to this women-led places, but they're white women, right? Or all the other places that you don't see yourself. Like, what encouraged you to really keep going? Because that could be really difficult, especially being first generation when it comes down to this kind of work.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of some sentimiento with all of that. I definitely felt like some internalized oppression, ish, right? Like, hated myself in high school and middle school, hated like where I came from, like just wanted to not have an accent, wanted to not be who I was, right? And that was really hard. But I think that the things that allowed me to advance was the things that I had naturally because my culture gave it to me, right? Like I was always very outgoing, very personable, really good at like with people, really good at like public speaking. Cause I remember I would see my dad speaking at church and I was just like, whoa, he's a great speaker. And I wanted to be like that, and the things that my upbringing provided me were the same things that launched me into like leadership positions, right? Even as a kid, organizing my primos, all my tias would be like, "Ay, Reina, she's gonna be the leader of the group," And so I like laugh at all those things now, but I'm just like, whoa, everything happens for a reason. And I think that the things that kept me going was in these white-led organizations. I don't even know what it was. I think that part of it was just that I have a lot of pride in my work. I have a lot of drive and passion for justice and democracy. And I truly believed in those values. And I think I always had to go back to that and say, well, this is going to be something good for our community. So I can't really let these people who don't value me bring me down. But there was a moment that I was just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't want to be part of a movement that's hypocritical. And there was a time where I thought I wasn't going to do it anymore. But I think that when I had that conversation with Jaime, the thing that really clicked in my mind was I can change this culture. I can make sure that other organizers who identify with my upbringing, with who I am, that they don't get treated that way, and that their experiences are valued, and that their culture is an asset, and that their skin color is beautiful, and that their stories really matter in the work that we do. Because ultimately, I think that the people who can make the best change are the people that are closest to the issues in our community. And that's Black and brown people. We are the front lines of injustice that is happening in this country.
And tell us a little more about that, because I feel like I also agree that if you live a life of, if anybody who lives a life of privilege, they don't see any injustice within their own community. And I think for you since a young age, you saw all those injustices. I feel like as a person of color, right, you get to see all the ways that our community is mistreated, right, or not brought what we deserve, right, to our own table. And I think, for you, like, you know those answers, and I feel like that's one when you mentioned earlier on, your community really respected you for all the things that you're already doing. And I think, when you're taking on the leadership roles and doing that for your community, you are respected and you do bring in the change that is very much needed. And you already know that it's like a body within you that you needed to bring out this change. Now, like for others that know that there's a need for change, what would be some ways that they could find it themselves as well? I know you mentioned earlier that you had to really drill yourself with some questions to really find out who you were. How do you find out what kind of leader you are?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely, I think that the kind of leader that I have been, I don't think that the core of that has ever changed. I think that it's been very consistent in terms of like my values. I've always tried to lead with my values and my story, and my most important to me, my friendships, my relationships, my family, and my community. And I think that when I realized that my life experiences were the most important was when I was taking the lessons I learned growing up and creating space for them in organizations that I worked in. So literally like being this child who was interpreting for my mom at her medical appointments all of a sudden became on an organizational level, like how do I interpret like power, political power, and power of the power that we have as a community? How do I translate that into my community's voice? And how do I take the stories and the things that my gente is telling me that is a problem? How do I translate that into policy and to systems change? And so that's what it really turned into. And I think that at Causa, it was when it started to become the most clear to me, because that was, like I said, that was when they were like on the front lines of bringing back the driver's license, along with other immigrant rights groups, dream activists, and day laborers and farm workers in Oregon. And so when we started fighting in the Capitol for driver's licenses, and then eventually we got put on the ballot for the driver's licenses. It was a driver's card back then, which, that was where we were in the moment politically. I realized that there was nobody that was doing ballot measure work and voter rights work and voter engagement work for Latino communities, because there had never been a bilingual ballot measure campaign in Oregon. And I knew that at that moment, there was something that my story had something to offer into changing a whole system. And I could take leadership in that by just, again, really kind of adjusting what I had already been living into this other system, which basically turned into the first bilingual bicultural campaign in Oregon. And it was also the first time we had seen Latino voter voting rates go up. And it was just like, whoa, how did we do this? Right. But again, it was a group of like all like Latinx young people who were going through the same struggles as me, and we're like, well, we're going to bring our lived experience to this campaign. And it was a really scrappy campaign, but we did it, and we lost really badly. But that was also one of the biggest reasons, actually, that I left Causa and went off to a mainstream organization, because I was like, you know what, like, I've heard a lot of bad things about this organization. I've heard that it's like they're awful and they're cutthroat. But I want to go learn how to run a ballot measure so I can come back and win one day for my people. And we're going to get that driver's license back. And we did. We got it back, and it's going to go in full effect in 2021. So it's a long-term game. But I guess at that time, I didn't know. I was so sad that we lost. But I think that that's just a continuation of leadership, and you have to have that really dark moment eventually in your leadership, especially when you're about to take the reins of a movement or an organization, you kind of have to hit that bottom point. And I think I hit rock bottom at one point, because I did have, as an organizer, I had to like come to terms with things that I thought were like normal organizing things. I was going out drinking all the time, doing drugs, and just like self-medicating on the issues that I was dealing with externally, and really trying to numb myself to those things, and having to come to terms with that in order to take the next step in my leadership was really, really difficult. But it took a lot of healing. It took doing things that I really regretted and I'm not proud of. But I think that I had to have those moments in order to go into a healing space, to be able to fully be present in this role, and to have a conversation with someone, just like this, where they can feel like, wow, this is a person that like has gone through something just like I have, and I want to follow that.
Yeah, and I feel like also like when it comes down to the nonprofit stuff, or even just organizing and being down with the community, like you get to hear you basically are in the midst of a lot of disheartening stories. There's a lot of things that our community goes through, and I think as an organizer, you hear the stories, you hear those experiences, and you really, for one, it fuels you, right? You're like, damn, I have to really do this, not because who else is gonna do it, right? But two is like you're internalizing all those emotions that are baggages that others are putting onto you, and you're just carrying those baggages to the, as like opposed to marathon. You're just continuing la lucha, ongoing. And I feel like that's something that us, as Latinos or Latinas, we definitely take on our whole bodies with us, and just, carry them throughout the lucha. I think for one, I wanted to hear, how, your experience with that, and how have you come to really manage to carry that way, or how do you process all that?
I think that definitely in my younger organizing days, it was absolutely that. It was like every story, I just carried it so close with me, and every call of another member getting picked up by ICE was just always so devastating. And it was like to a point that I could not live with myself. Like it was that hard. So I think that a lot of organizers maybe they realize it, maybe they don't, but we do traumatize ourselves over and over again when we're doing this work. And we haven't created an environment, I think, in social justice. I think we're just now starting to really go that direction, and we want to do it so badly. And it's hard to create that space, and it's hard to take the time to spend, the money, spend the resources on that to be able to do that. But I don't think that, at least when I was an organizer, that we had the space to be able to hold those stories and also ask people to re-trigger themselves with those stories in the name of the movement, because that's like always, it's in the name of the movement, right? Which is like also, that part of it was also a turnoff for me, honestly. And not create like a space where people can come together and heal, whether that is through, I don't know, through just even talking to an elder and hearing how they did it. Like all of that stuff is healing. And we needed to have more intentional spaces that way. And I mean, honestly, that's something that I really am very, very dedicated to. I think that leadership development is more than just having like a fancy training, right? It has to have some element of healing, because the moments that I have felt the most en comunidad and where I really just was able to own my leadership was when I was actually able to talk to elders and to have coaches who were like, yeah, you're not alone. And let me show you one of the ways that we did it. And it's really, really grounding. And you also get to learn about your history, which to me has been one of the most healing things I could ever do, has been to really find my own ways to understand our history as Latinx folks, as people who have deep roots in fighting for social justice in this country, but you never learn about it anywhere else unless you go find it yourself. that has been an essential part in me being able to be the best leader I can be for the organizers that now follow me, right, in the organization I'm in.
And I really love how you keep referring to elders, they really do bring La Medicina to our communities. And I'm glad you recognize that and go to value it, to that extent. And I think something else that I wanted to, know before, we go even further is like even your dad's words, when it comes on, when he said, que yo sí también fui de PCUN, I know that also might have been healing words for you as well. What was your reflection when he did say that? Did you imagine that it would be like, did you feel like it was a full circle, or what was your thoughts when he did mention that?
Oh yeah, I was just like, whoa, this everything is connected, right? Everything is interconnected. And we talk about interconnectedness a lot because I think that we can't just talk about immigration. We can't just talk about farm workers. We can't just talk about gender justice. We got to talk about it in a very interconnected way. And to me, I was just like, whoa, this is interconnection at work right now. So I thought that that was really great. And, him and I don't have a great relationship, honestly. Like we don't ever talk. And just to be able to know that, I was just like, whoa, I feel really connected to you right now, even though I haven't talked to you in years.
Even you mentioning that, just, it hit me too. That's something, I'm glad that that has such a great significance to you and that you're able to like really hold that closely to you as well. And I was wondering, just like as my, few last questions, like what's other moments that you hold closely to you as an executive director or overall as a leader within your community? What are some other moments that you really hold close to your heart?
Well, there's so many really beautiful moments. I think that one of the moments that I'm so grateful for was that, and it was like an ongoing process. But when I started my role at PCUN, Ramon, my predecessor, he stayed on for a whole year to be by my side during my first year of leadership, as PCUN's the president of the union and the executive director of PCUN. And he is a founder. He was the longest sitting president. He was my mentor for like 10 years. He's still my mentor. And was also just not teaching me how to be an executive director. Honestly, he didn't show me step by step how to do this. He didn't teach me how to make systems. Like that's not what his role was at all. His role was to walk beside me and say, here's to really like hand down the essence of his leadership and the things, and to coach me through, not to tell me how to make decisions, but to say, so these are things to take into consideration, but what are you going to do? And also many times he knew, I think he would have to say, she is the leader now. And you can't come to me anymore. And she's the leader now. And she's amazing. And so now, and just being my biggest cheerleader too. So I think that I really, really cherish. There were moments too that I was just like, I'm like, I'm ready for you to retire. but I really cherished those moments. And then we had this really beautiful celebration that was his retirement party, but it was also my like coming out party. And we just had a really beautiful celebration that said goodbye to his, to his time here at PCUN, but also it felt really good to get like a standing ovation when I got presented. And it was really cool. And also I'm the first woman to lead PCUN. Before it was, no surprise, it was dominated by men, and and men started the organization because they were the ones que estaban aquí cuando toda la familia estaba en Mexico. So it's really cool to have that, but I also know that there's women that were also on the board of PCUN who started PCUN that nobody talks about. And those women like Carmen Gonzalez and Brenda Mendoza, women who are tough as nails, and who have some of the like thickest skin, that I just always, I try to really remember that it wasn't just them, that it was these other mujeres that really went through a lot, that you don't hear about, similar to that Dolores Huerta documentary. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's very, insightful and very similar to what we saw here.
My last question is that, for one, you really go to talk about mentors, and now there's a lot, and I feel like that's been a significant role or component to you taking on all these leadership roles and you really making this change that you are and developing to the person that you are, because you are definitely an incredible leader within, all the organizations and all the activities you're partaking in. How did you manage to find the leaders that you did find? Who were they? Were they elders? Were they specific people? Did you have role models? Or just like as a first generation, when it comes down to all that, who did you look up to, or where did you find guidance?
Yeah, I mean, I think my foundation has always been my mother, right? Mi mamá, mi madre, y mi abuelita. I think that the strong woman, the strong independent woman that had to be came from them, and the all my values and my moral compass came from them. I wish I could say it came from my father, but he was an adventurer, and that's great. I'm very happy for him, but like all my character really came from the women and that brought me up. So I mean, I think the foundation was them. Pero I think that in terms of having role models and mentors, it took a while for me to find them, and I wasn't out there like interviewing women and men to see if, and people, that to see if they would be my mentors. But eventually they just kind of came. And one of the first women of color that I saw in a really strong leadership position was Helena Huang, who's now at the Ford Foundation in New York. But she was like, back in my younger organizer days, I would call her Mama Helena, because she was like always looking out for me in my darkest moments, but my most like active, eat, breathe, sleep organizing moments too, right? Where I was just like so dedicated to causa, but didn't have a lot of people to look to for guidance. And the women, unfortunately, that were within the movement, I wasn't feeling a lot of support from. And I don't know what that's about. I think that we could talk about a whole program about that, about how like sometimes you don't find women mentors within your own movimiento. But she's an Asian American woman, and it was the first time I saw a woman that was an Asian American woman of color, who was the executive director of an organization in my community, and who was very like knew a lot about things that I didn't know anything about, and who would take me out to lunch and just ask me how I was doing. And she would coach me and say, no, you have to ask them for more, or you should negotiate that position. You should be the director of that. And just really showed me how to speak up. So I look up to her a lot. I think that another person other people that really took care of me in those moments that were more my peers, but also I look up to them so much. My dear friend, Nicole Brown, who's now in LA, actually working around youth justice. And also Umi Vera, who is now with Familia, and she's a badass trans activist doing work in Tacoma right now to get trans women out of detention, just doing some amazing stuff, and just having those moments with them, talking all night about our hopes and dreams and making them a reality.
And as always, you know what I'm about to say. And I want to say muchas gracias once again for tuning into Barrio Voices. It really means a lot to me to have all of y'all supporting, everybody that's tuning into every episode. And yes, everybody that's also sharing the content, making sure that everybody else within their own barrios gets to hear our own voices, you know what I mean? And if y'all want to continue supporting and get early access to different content within our own podcast, now make sure that y'all go to patreon.com/Barrio Voices. I'm going to be uploading a lot more early access to all the episodes to come, so if you want to have first dibs on all the episodes that are going to be released, make sure that you go check it out, and become a sponsor. And so besides all that, like always, like I said earlier, right now, muchas gracias. Y'all been in tune to Barrio Voices, where we highlight the voices of our barrios, familias, and communities. This is Velas, and to you all, much love, cuídense, órale.